You're tuned in to an all-new season of Teng Tools Muscle Garage, the home of New Zealand's toughest muscle cars, hot rods and street machines. Proudly brought to you by Teng Tools in association with Mount Shop, Maguire's and Need a Car. Coming up in this episode, Dave's big block bagged and plain badass beach hop topping 64 Galaxie, and we shed raid Neil's epic speedway shrine in the Manawatu. But first, thanks to our mates at Maguire's, we're off to take in the bright lights of the Teng Tools Grand National Rod and Custom Show. CRC Speed Show is an annual auto event held at Auckland's ASB Showgrounds. While the event has a bit of something for all that make up New Zealand's automotive landscape, it's the hall that plays host to the Teng Tools Grand National Rod and Custom Show that we always make a beeline for. It's a judged event with classes covering most sub-genres of New Zealand's hot rod, custom and muscle car scene. And with a lineup as good as this one, splitting them is a pretty tough ask.
It is. The good news is that it's not all subjective. So we do have judging sheets that guide us through a points process of breaking a car down into its various components, such as body, paint, engineering, interior, engine bay, wheels. There's a little bit of subjectivity in the last line of the judging sheet, which says cool factor, which is actually a really, really good idea because it gives somebody the opportunity who perhaps doesn't have the biggest budget in the world, but they exercise really, really good taste, in terms of colour, stance, and that sort of thing. So it makes it fair, but yeah, still a hard job.
The Teng Tools Grand National Rod and Custom Show has also become the place to debut your high-caliber car. Pro builders like Matamata Panelworks have made something of a habit of it, unveiling something new nearly every year. But they're not alone. Sure, 2019 show had its regulars, but impressively, a good chunk of the field were newly built cars, like Craig's Viper-powered Challenger, fresh out the doors of Obsession muscle cars.
1970 Dodge Challenger, slightly modified. I was looking for a project. I was at the stage of my life where I thought I was going to be semi-retired. Yeah, this was just something I wanted to move on to in life, just to tick off another one of life's boxes. Yeah. A guy in Christchurch had started the project. He had spent 7 years on it. He'd collected most of the parts, most of them, not all of them. And yeah, we progressed from there. Luckily, the guy I got it off had spent a couple of years getting the computer to run outside the original car. It wasn't in the car or anything like that, it was sitting on a test bench. I started with the engineering, I gutted the inside of the car, put new chassis rails in. Got to the point where I decided that I'd reached the end of my expertise and sourced out Ian from Obsession Muscle Cars. Yeah, I was recommended to go and see a POM about an American car. Probably a long lifetime friendship has developed from there.
This year's Speed Show played host to conceptual and customizing legend Chip Foose. He singled out the Max Speed Shop built 1932 Ford Roadster of Royce Everett as his pick of the show. Not hard to see why, but eagle eyes would have spotted that it wasn't the show's only connection to US customizing royalty.
Car, I believe, was originally in California, built by Sam Barris, who passed away in the late 60s, approximately 1967. Then his brother carried on promoting the Barris enterprise, building cars for movie cars, the Batmobile, the Munsters, etc.
The Ford Coupe is actually a 35, but with a 36 facelift incorporating early 40s Chevy headlights. The roof has been sliced and diced 3 inches, and motivation comes courtesy of a 350-350 combo hanging above a Chrysler independent front end. For Spook, the chance to pedal the iconic mid-30s coupe didn't require a whole bunch of arm twisting.
I actually owned, at that time, 3 of them, because I own a yellow 36 Ford 3-window that broke a land speed record in America on Bonneville, and I wanted to chop one, and I didn't want to chop that because of its history. So we bought this one. Very nice cars here, better show cars than this is, but I'm into driving them on the road. It rained like anything this morning, but I got here.
No roof chops for our next example. Brendan Everett's 54 Chevy is very much on the home stretch at the skilled hands of Hamilton workshop Bad Penny. Its early 60s show car era styling is all about enhancing what the factory gave you. Well, most of what the factory gave you.
Mild custom, you're kind of dealing with, say, French headlights, no real roof chop. You know, you probably have shaved emblems and badges, smoothed out hood and trunk lid, which that one hasn't got. But it has got subtle touches like, you know, custom exhaust tips, you know, different wheels and caps and lowered and, yeah, just small things, you know. If it was an extreme custom, we'd have a big roof chop going on and should be slammed to the ground and all sorts going on, yeah. Yeah, it came to us, rolling body, it was already painted, obviously not those colours, but yeah, it was a big jigsaw, so we've sort of pieced it together to get it to the stage it's at now. I love it. I think it's an awesome looking car, and especially the colour combination that we've gone with. For that year car, for sure, there's not too many set up like that in New Zealand, so to have that looking the way it does, it's definitely a standout from other early 50s cars in New Zealand. Hopefully it might be a bit of a leader and other people will follow the trend, so we'll see what happens.
While the show provided no shortage of inspiration for what your finished car could look like, Paul Duff of Body Mods was keen to share just what it takes to get there. While arrow straight bodywork and panel gaps a robot would be proud of is something we've come to expect from this Waikato workshop, the Monaro takes things a big step further. Art Morrison is a US company. Their chassis are the gold standard if you want to give your 20th century car 21st century drivability. But they're not quite the name you'd expect to find weaved into a very Australian unibody car.
It is starting to happen more. In fact, Art Morrison, the name's coming up a lot more. This is designed for this car. So wheelbase is correct, track is correct. So all we have to concentrate on is putting the body on top of the chassis. No comparison between the two. This is just obviously decades advanced in technology, and it will show as an end product. Drivability, maintenance, it's going to look like a Holden Monaro, but it's going to drive beautifully. I thoroughly enjoy showing people at this stage. There's nothing to hide here. It's in bare metal, it shows everything that we do, it shows how we do it. We want it to look like it was actually always on this chassis, not like it's just been plonked on and the two things don't get along with each other. I quite enjoy that challenge. It involves some design work, obviously some fabrication, and it's a big part of what we do, and comfortable doing it.
The Monaro was a special guest on the stand of the Low Volume Vehicle Technical Association, or LVVTA to their friends. If you've modified a vehicle in New Zealand, you'll no doubt be familiar with the certification system. LVVTA CEO and founder Tony Johnson was out to prove men can multitask. Not only was he part of the show's official judging team, but also on hand with his team to educate and advise an inspired show audience on how to ensure their own modifications meet the required standard for New Zealand roads.
It's neat to see pro-built cars and cars coming in from the US, but for me personally, I get a bigger buzz still when I see a Kiwi guy who has built a great car in his garage at home, because I guess that's what I've been personally working for the last 30 years this year with the low volume system, to sort of try and keep an environment where you or me or that guy over there could build a car at home, providing he's got a basic set of skills and a willingness to follow some rules, and that's really neat when we see good home-built cars in a show like this holding their head up.
The LVVTA role sits right between a rock and a hard place. Established when the hobby was in grave danger of being legislated out of existence, they're currently contracted as a go-between, a mediator if you will, between a government whose life would be simpler if these cars had no place on our roads, and on the other side, a modified car community whose very culture was born from a rebellious streak and a desire to push the rules.
As a hobby, we really needed to do something. There was, everybody's aware that the government sort of brought the knife down and wanted to stop it, and so we reacted from that point of view and developed the system, and everything sort of rolled off from there. But I think what a lot of people don't realise, unless they were around in the 80s, was really how bad a job a lot of us were doing in terms of modifying cars. There was always the John Reeds and the guys that did a great job even back then, but there were a heck of a lot of guys doing the best they could without any knowledge or training or textbooks or anything, and there needed to be a set of rules or a set of standards to try and get everybody up working where the good guys are working, and that's really happened there. Everybody gets it. They all know you've got to follow standards, you've got to get a certifier involved. it's cool. It's cool for me to sort of look around and, you know, I don't see poorly engineered cars anymore. They're really good. It's really pleasing.
Amazing results, even at full sight.
You're back with Teng Tools Muscle Garage. We're shed raiding Neil's Manawatu Speedway Shrine very shortly. But first, the team from Car sent us to track down Dave Murtagh and his slick 64 Galaxie, a car that marks a step into the old school.
Cars that I've owned have been all late model. And with the car club that I'm in Western Bays, I guess going to events and everything, sort of sticking out like a bit of a sore thumb.
The fix? eBay. And no, not the American one. It was the searing orange glow from an auction on the Australian site that would grab Dave's attention. When the bidding fizzed out prior to the reserve, it was time to do things the old-fashioned way.
I managed to track down who the owners were, and then over the course of 6 weeks or so, we sort of just got into a negotiating stage and backwards and forwards, and finally agreed on a figure that we're both happy with, and here it is today.
In a hobby largely dictated to by the heart, Dave used his head. You see, the purchase of the big Ford wasn't his first foray into old school territory. His first, a stalled project of a '71 Mustang. There's not many finished projects that can claim their book value matches the investment, and it was the cold hard realization that the '71 had already eaten plenty of Dave's time and money and was still far from done. Time for a rethink. The new plan of attack? Make someone else's loss his gain. And this 64, pieced together by Pat's Pro Restos, clearly wasn't built on the cheap.
I think just for the workmanship and everything, and what had been, obviously what someone had invested and spent on it, and it was just going to save, again, a whole lot of blood, sweat and tears. You could just get in there and start it up, drive it. This one was built, done. It was just a no-brainer. A no-brainer.
It's an impact car in every sense. Powered by one enormous big block Ford, a 557 cube stroker, and we'll save you the math, that's over 9 litres. The big hardtop's low-slung silhouette comes courtesy of air ride shockwave bags, but it's the fit and finish where the car quite literally shines, and those details continue into the cabin. But perhaps the biggest motivator for Dave was actually the script on the valve covers.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for the 55, 56 F100s, but all the ones that I've seen on eBay in the States and everything, unfortunately, have been powered with Chevs. This one, it's been kept Ford all the way through, and that was, again, that was a huge big tick for me.
It's fair to say the big coupe has made an impact fitting of its imposing size on this side of the Tasman too, taking out top spot at 2019's Repco Beach Hop and Kaikoura Hop. No easy feat at events of that scale. Dave, however, is a little less excited about the attention.
Any events that we just go to, the car gets parked up, set up, and I run for the hills. It's definitely not a look at me scenario. If people appreciate the car, they appreciate it. If they don't, it's each to his own.
Given the Galaxie's show credentials and immaculate presentation, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's a trailer queen, which it is, kind of.
It's more the I think the scenario of going from Wellington, a few of the trips that we go to, or events we go to, are a wee way away, and I think this thing just loves to drink fuel. To me, it's just a way easier form of getting it from point A to point B, and once we get there, enjoy it. I get brief from my fellow club members and everything about it being a trailer queen, but that's what it is, and that's what it is.
But this trailer queen seems to get along just fine. When asked,
when it was originally built, it was dynoed at about 585 horse, 600 pounds of torque. So no, definitely, when you put your foot into it, it goes. It goes. For me, it's not about speed or anything with it. It's just a cruiser. You just get out there, enjoy the sound of the engine. You see our white lines going past, and it's one of those ones that you don't feel as though you're under a timeline to get somewhere quick. It's just, enjoy it.
And proof that no car is ever really done, Dave has a few things in store for his Galaxie. The engine bay is due to cop some serious smoothing and perhaps a change of rolling stock. And it even could get a stablemate, one that might surprise friends of this die-hard Ford man. But every man has his limits.
I'm partial to the shape of the Chevy C10, but if I did get swayed into that, it would definitely be Ford power. Without a doubt.
Right, shed raid time. This week, our mates at Mount Shop pointed us to the Manawatu to gatecrash Neil Lovejoy's epic speedway shrine.
Well, I guess it's a reflection of my passions. I always liked cars and motor racing, that sort of thing. My parents used to take us to the Levin motor racing track. My dad was a builder. He had an old 46 Chevy truck with a flat deck on the back, which he built a grandstand, and we used to go down there and watch the races down there, and we would bring it back to Palmy and set up for the speedway and watch the speedway that night as well. So it's just evolved from there. My passion is sprint cars, and mostly any midget cars as well, but mainly sprint cars.
And the building that houses Neil's hobbies is rather special in its own right too.
We were looking at building some years ago, and this is my grandparents' place. I had fond memories of being a kid here, so we thought, well, let's buy this place. As well as the house, there was a big old shed, and my grandfather was a wood and coal merchant back in the 20s and 30s. Trucks used to back in here with coal and wood and what have you back in that time. And then, of course, once we bought the place, we could start to reconfigure the shed to what we wanted.
We're not going to lie, this isn't the biggest shed we've raided on this show. But what it lacks in square meters is more than made up for in aesthetics and appeal. Neil's created one seriously cool space here that unsurprisingly has snatched a lot of hosting duties from the house itself. But there's more going on than a first glance suggests, with a workshop off to one side and the other a rather big surprise, an elaborate model railway built from a staggering 500 foot of track and set to the backdrop of 90s era Northern America. And in fact, it was the model railway hobby that would push Neil's love of speedway from longtime spectator and photographer to behind the wheel. Confused? Stick with me here. Fellow hobbyists in town to view the railway noted Neil's model speedway cars next door and informed him they were restoring a couple of full-size midget cars. Neil's interest was piqued, eventually sourcing his own midget, later joining forces with a mate to restore a 410 cube Gertie-powered sprint car dressed in the battle colours of Steve Kinzer.
We drove that for 10 years, and to drive one of those things is just massive. The acceleration, the throttle response, absolutely amazing, and I'd recommend it to anybody.
And Neil's not done yet. With a new car on the go, this time it's an 80s era sprint car based around an Osborne-style chassis.
With the current cars, they've got the roll cage and they've got what they call a high bar, and that is basically a strengthening part of the chassis that goes down. Well, these were previous to that. So you had the roll cage and then the chassis rails were basically at the head height of the engine. And that era I really, really liked. There was some great racing back in those days. I found this car, or this chassis, on Trade Me, and it was like $700. Thought it was just the chassis, but there was a lot of other bits and pieces with it when I picked it up. It'll be running a 355 Chevy, steel motor. It'll be Hellborn injection, Vertex mag and all the period stuff on it. So these things are only weighing sort of 1,200–1,300 pounds, so you know, they get your attention real quick.
Its stablemate isn't much of a slug either. One of just 350 manual 2015 Special Edition Green Flash Camaros. It's the third Camaro in Neil's ownership. But they're all just small pieces of a big picture here. Neil's shed is a snapshot of a lifetime of hobbies and memories.
The good thing with me, I've had a lot of good friends over the years, and we've all sort of stuck together. So we started with models, then we got into model railways, and then we got into American cars and speedway. And it's just great to have a whole group of friends that have stuck together for life, that have all followed similar passions. Yeah. And it's good to have them around here and have a few drinks and chew the fat.
Your ride needs some love? We've got you sorted. Thanks to our mates at Maguire's, we have this massive complete car care pack worth $700 to give away, plus a $500 Mount Shop voucher to keep the underside shipshape too. To enter, simply head to themotorhood.com and hit the Teng Tools Muscle Garage link. The winner will be drawn at the end of the series. Easy. Teng Tools Muscle Garage was proudly brought to you by Teng Tools. Get organised. Mount Shop, undercar specialists. Maguire's, people who love cars love Maguire's. And Need a Car, the easy way to research and buy cars online.